Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 11, Episode 11. Yes, that's right. This one goes to 11. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
Our guest on this episode is David Lafitte, President and CEO of Austin-based Tecovas, a retailer I first experienced visiting you, Steve, in Dallas, and came to both admire and just recently pronounced correctly, a fast-growing specialty retailer of all things cowboy expanding across the nation. David came to Tecovas from Decker Brands, which includes Hoka. So given his last name, it feels like he was born to be in this particular element of the business. Now, in the news, we'll be talking about tariff turmoil, this time for the Trump government at the Supreme Court level. We pay a long overdue visit to the Wobbly Unicorn Corner. We talk about Ralph Lauren and Tapestry surprises on the upside. And after our interview with David, we'll be back to talk about remarkable stories of the week and take a peek around the corner of what's on our mind. Now, it is time for the shameless self-promotion segment of the show. Steve, raise your voice, and tell all the people the good news.
Yes, happy shameless self-promotion day to all who celebrate. No, our news is that both of us have again been named to the Top Voices program for the NRF. So this is 50 folks that somehow, and the crowd goes wild. Yes, 50 folks who from around the world who are viewed to be experts of sorts. So we fooled them again for the second straight year. And actually, we are one of a handful of people that have been on both years. So that's very nice. So we will be talking a bit more about our overall plans at the NRF, which includes doing some podcasting and a whole bunch of other things. So we'll get into a little bit more of that detail in the weeks ahead. But my other news is, I'm not sure anybody can tell that's watching this on YouTube, but I am in a hotel. I can't talk because of jet lag. I am, or at least that's my excuse. I'm in a hotel in London.
Don't hurt yourself there. Don't hurt yourself.
I know. And in London, England, not London, Ontario, which I was very close to just a few days ago.
That's right.
But London, England for the next week or so. So next week, I suppose we'll talk a little bit more about perhaps what happened while I was here, because I have been here all of about 2 hours and not much has happened.
Well, you sound great for somebody who just did some intercontinental travel, so to speak. So let's turn our minds now to the news of the week. Let's start with what's going on in the Supreme Court with the potentially earth-shakingness of the decisions around the tariff and the Trump government's ability to continue to impose tariffs. It's not going so well in the early days from my reading of the discussions with the court justices, right?
Yeah, well, that's the interpretation. I guess the caveat here that several folks that I follow that are much more keen observers of the Supreme Court than I am, for sure, and are also attorneys, which is probably helpful when you're talking about legal matters. Yeah. They say, yes, to a certain degree, you can read the tea leaves based upon what the justices' questions are like, where they appear to have a certain amount of skepticism or where they probe. And from that perspective, it definitely looked like really all the members of the court, but kind of most noticeably or most interestingly, the Trump-appointed justices seemed to have a lot of skepticism about the government's case supporting these tariffs. Now, just as a quick reminder for some folks, or maybe people that don't realize this, in the U.S., particularly for our international listeners, tariffs are set by Congress, not the executive branch, not the president, though under certain cases, the president can exercise emergency power. And the claim, and there's actually two plaintiffs in this case, the claim is that the justice or the executive branch president exceeded his powers. And really, there's kind of two themes that have been brought up. One is, what's the emergency exactly? And let's just say the responses apparently from the president's attorneys were not super compelling. Seemed to be a lot of skepticism as to what the emergency is in general. But the second thing relates to the so-called reciprocal tariffs. So one of the things many people will remember, the administration basically had a blanket set of tariffs to all countries. And many of the justices said, well, how can it be that all of a sudden there are these emergencies in 67, however many, is a very large number of countries that are subject to these. Like how can that be? What is the emergency exactly that affects all these countries? And then one of the things I love, or one of the attorneys from the government gave some gobbledygook answer, and Judge Coney Barrett said, so what's the emergency in Switzerland exactly? Like, give me a little bit more. There were a lot of those kinds of things. I won't go too deep on it, but I would say overall, yes, the general impression was they were quite skeptical. Now, there's lots more to happen. Just, one of the things I've seen from these people that follow this much more closely is just because there is a line of skepticism doesn't necessarily mean that's where the justices are going to end up. Mm-hmm. A couple other just unclear things or uncertain things here is this round, not to get too into the weeds on the way Supreme Court works, but when they are in session and they hear all these arguments, they make a commitment to when they will rule, and all the rulings for the cases they're currently hearing need to be decided by June. They could, in fact, be decided earlier. I don't think at this point we have any. I mean, on the one hand, you can make an argument this is more urgent because of the massive effects it's having on the economy and countries and companies and all this kind of stuff. But it is unclear what the timing of the decision would be. This does not affect all the tariffs that are in place. It is not clear if the government were to lose whether and how tariffs would be refunded. And there's also just this whole issue that the Trump government has basically said, we need these tariffs to fund all these other things. Federal government's already running big deficits. In fact, the deficits have increased despite receiving tariff revenue. The deficit has increased faster in the last 3 months than it did during the COVID crisis. So there's a lot of stuff to come out. So timing very uncertain.
All right. Well, let's get past the government stuff and the tariff stuff. And I almost want to say I wish we were talking about the gap, because then I could say mind the gap. Anybody who's been to London would know what that means. But instead, we are going to return a long overdue visit to the Wobbly Unicorn Corner. Let's talk about Allbirds.
Many of you are probably feeling waxing nostalgic, perhaps, because you haven't heard the Wobbly Unicorn Corner music in a while. And for those of you who have no clue what that's about, well, the Wobbly Unicorn Corner is really things that a place we have gone over the years to talk about some of these really once hot, very well-funded, overly funded as it turns out, disruptor brands that have fallen on hard times. Well, Allbirds is a brand that we talked about quite a lot previously, haven't talked about for a while. And there was some hope because they've been taking some aggressive actions to try to right-size the business, closing some stores, getting more into wholesale, shifting the product line. And even though their results the last several quarters haven't been great, I thought I'd give them a little bit of time to see if they can right the ship. Well, it's not looking so great. They just reported a quarter that had their sales down 23%. That's 20% in the U.S., over 30% internationally. Now, a lot of that is, in fact, the store closings, but they have not really had any sales momentum for, I want to say, 3 years now, something like that. Their net loss is $20 million. So this is actually a pretty tiny brand. If they keep on this trend, they're going to be barely over $100 million. So this was a company that was, when they went public, I think they got to about a peak valuation of about $3.5 billion. So obviously investors thought this could be a multi-billion-dollar, very profitable brand. They obviously are not anywhere close to that trajectory. So their stock is down. Hope everybody's sitting down, particularly those people that might have invested in this stock. They need to be sitting down and perhaps have a shot of tequila. Stock is down 98.5% from its peak, plus or minus a little bit, because I did not check it this morning.
That deserves an audible cue. All right, we are back. One of my favorite scenes from that very, very famous movie that happens in Las Vegas. We are back, and that must be what people are saying as they walk the halls in Ralph Lauren and Tapestry. Talk about their surprising results on the upside.
Well, if you listen to last week's episode, we mostly focused on kind of the reset going on in luxury and fashion. So this is tied to some of the comments there. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it now. We'll wait, then come back. But a big theme in that was just how much of luxury has really stalled. But there are several exceptions. And this past week, we got some great examples of a couple of big brands, big global brands that are doing really well. So Ralph Lauren gallops ahead with strong quarterly results. Quite a big business, quite a mature business, but comp store sales up 13%. North America was about on trend there, but Europe is performing quite a bit better for them, and they are making very nice money. Net income up 40%. And then Tapestry, so this is the company, in case you don't know, that is the owners of Coach and Kate Spade. Coach is the biggest brand there. Coach revenue up 22%. Kate Spade not holding its own. They were actually down. But despite that, and despite presumably some decent headwinds from tariffs, net income up 47%. Now, there's a pretty stark contrast, just very briefly, to Capri Holdings, which is another one of these companies that has a few of these kind of accessible luxury brands. Their two big brands are Kors and Jimmy Choo. Capri had sales declines and profit declines. So you really can see the winners and losers here shaping up pretty quickly. But I guess more broadly, the question is, and again, we touched on some of this in last week's episode and a couple of previous episodes, are that we're starting to see this slowdown, some green shoots that are suggesting, not that every player will do well, because clearly there's some very, very clear winners and losers. But when you see companies that are able to put up low teens growth, that starts to obviously lift the overall sector. I
like how you were channeling our friend Ben Miller there from London. Green shoots. You're not in London for more than a few hours, and you're already channeling.
I'm going to be saying schedule and all,
process. Welcome to the Commonwealth. I must welcome you as well to the Commonwealth countries. All right. Well, that's a wrap on the news. Let's get now to our fantastic interview with David Lafitte, and shout out to Nick, store manager Nick in Soho. I had the opportunity to visit a couple of weeks ago, and great hospitality, which is reflected in what David talks about. Got a great hat for anybody, my new favorite hat for anybody who's watching on YouTube. Let's hear from David.
Well, David, welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Where do we find you today?
Thanks for having me. I'm in Austin, Texas at our headquarters today.
But let's just start out getting to know you a little bit before we get into knowing the brand and where you guys are going. Just could you share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you ended up here on the podcast?
Yeah, so I actually was a practicing attorney for about 25 years. I was a corporate lawyer at a law firm, sort of a mid-sized law firm based on the West Coast. One of my clients was Deckers Brands, who's the parent of UGG and Hoka. 1 year, about 10 years ago now, in 2015, the then chairman and CEO suggested I should take the chief operating officer role that they were recruiting for about a year. So I wasn't sure if he was kidding or not. I was like, well, I don't know anything about operations or footwear, but other than that, it sounds like a perfect fit. He's like, no, I'm serious. I think you'd be good at this. And so about a month after that conversation, I was taking a fairly significant book of business and giving it away to my partners and resigning from my law firm to jump in at Deckers as their chief operating officer. That was in 2015. And there, my kind of purview was running a lot of the shared services for multiple brands. So everything from product development to sourcing and production, distribution, logistics, demand planning, supply planning, innovation, IT, a lot of the things that weren't the front-facing marketing, design on product, that sort of thing. So that was a fun ride. Did that for about 8 years. Then got a call from Tecovas, who I knew because back in about 2019 or 2018, the Deckers management team thought Tecovas was doing some interesting things, kind of having started as a digitally native company, doing a few things in marketing that at the time were a little bit unique. And so we flew to Austin to kind of meet the team. And that's when I established a relationship with the founder, Paul Hedrick. And he and I kind of stayed in touch maybe once a year, twice a year, just to kind of catch up and see how we were doing mutually, how Tecovas was getting along. And then I had heard and got a call that they were searching for a CEO. Would I be interested? And didn't think much about it and said, sure. And next thing I know, I'm moving to Austin. And that happened about a little over 3 years ago. So I've been in the chair now just over 3 years.
Just out of curiosity, how difficult was that transition?
It was a big learning curve. I think the biggest takeaway I had at the time when I moved to Deckers was that, look, I don't know anything about this, but it kind of gave me a clean slate almost as a consultant going into a company where you just ask a lot of questions and why are we doing this? What's working? What's not? Realizing that when I say I want to be the stupidest person in the room, I mean it. And not that that's that difficult to do for me, but nevertheless, I did know that I needed to surround myself with people that were very good. And I needed to know enough to know and have decent judgment about, how effective the team was on what we were working on. I think also the thing about Deckers at the time was the mandate was pretty clear. I've said this before, but, the operating margins had gone from, on a pretty strictly wholesale business, from about 20% down to about 9.5% as the company was layering in retail, brick and mortar, doing a bunch of things that were kind of having an issue with the profitability. So going in, the mandate was pretty clear, need to go find cost of goods sold, reducing it. And so a lot of it was, okay, team, what ideas do you have? And a lot of hands went up saying, I think we could do this and save 50 million. We could do this and save 30 million. Yeah. And some of it was like, well, why didn't we do it? And well, there were headwinds over here, obstacles over there. So a lot of what I think early on I was doing was just, trying to get people and clearing obstacles that were in the way of, for example, a factory didn't like the fact that we might be looking at material cutting yields for expensive materials. And that shouldn't be a feeding trough. That should be a line item, and they should have a little bit of a buffer on, what their cutting yield is, but it shouldn't be 20%. That's just a very profitable. And their view was, if we can cut better than other factories, then we should be profiting from it. It's like, no, you should be getting more units from it, but you shouldn't have a line item where you're profiting on something that, ought to be, how much material you're buying to make 100,000 pairs of classic UGG boots. There were things like that, and we have to sit down with the factories and say, we will get you more units, and we're not going to spray product to 30 factories. We're going to pick 5 strategic ones and start really partnering with you all. So there were just things like that got some initiatives going. And so I learned a lot along the way, but a lot of it was, again, the team doing a lot of the heavy lifting, to be honest.
Dave, the brand has been on just such a remarkable journey. As Steve mentioned, he introduced me to not only the wonderfulness of Austin and Texas barbecue, but I walked in your store and I was like, wow, what an amazing place. And I see a lot of stores, and it really jumped out at me. So could you share with the listeners the origin of the brand and what makes it remarkable in your eyes?
Sure. So the brand started, as I mentioned, as digitally native in 2015. At the time, Paul Hedrick, the founder, kind of saw a gap in the Western market. You had a couple of brands that were well known without much of a direct consumer presence and selling into a fairly fragmented marketplace with a lot of mom and pop independent stores that had a couple of larger players, 2 exceptions to that, mainly Boot Barn and Cavender's. So kind of saw an opportunity to have a direct consumer business in this Western boot space and kind of becoming known as the Warby Parker of cowboy boots. I think Paul recognized fairly early on that a retail presence and showcasing what the brand can be and the assortment in a kind of a sit and fit environment that was very, masculine, but as I said, could showcase the brand. So in 2019, started to open stores. And sort of over the years, we've kind of transitioned the positioning to being a premium lifestyle brand and kind of focused on 2 main pillars. One is this incredible crafted quality product that we don't cut corners on. We put a lot of time and attention into it. and it's a very authentic product. And then selling those in an environment that we call radical hospitality. And so we spend a lot of time training our retail associates, recruiting them, training them, retaining them. They're well aware of our brand and the product. We have a lot of kind of experiential things such as branding, customization in the stores. About 25% of our transactions in 2024 had some sort of customization or personalization, like branding or chain stitching on a hat, things like that. We have a bar in every store except one, serving complimentary alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. Last year, I think we served about 250,000 drinks throughout our fleet.
Amazing.
We also want to make it approachable. A lot of people are used to wearing boots. Others might be first timers. And, if you walk into a 12,000 square foot store with a wall of boots and you don't know much, it can be fairly intimidating. So we try and make it a pretty welcoming environment and not a hard sell. We want to educate people, have them, enjoy the beverage and learn about product and how they might style it, what occasions they may, want to wear it to. So that's kind of what we've done. I think the good news is that Paul's vision on the look and feel of the stores was spot on. So we've had the luxury of not having to go back and kind of rethink about that, other than what makes sense operationally to kind of make these more efficient and more productive. That's a very different discussion than having to rebrand something. So we think a lot of the positioning of the brand was very spot on, and now it's more about flawless execution.
As it turns out, I've been mispronouncing the name of your retail brand for about 2 years. So could you tell us the best way to pronounce, the right way to pronounce the brand, and what's the genesis of that brand name?
Yeah, a good question. So the name is Tecovas, Tecovas. A lot of people may forget the S and call it Tecova, but it's Tecovas. And it's actually the geological formation in the Palo Duro Canyon in Texas, which is similar to the Grand Canyon, not quite as grand, but in Texas. And so it's a geological formation in the Palo Duro Canyon.
That's a fun fact.
Yeah.
So if you take one thing away, audience, you now know some random things about our brand name. But hey, let's spend some time on your growth strategy. You've gotten into this a little bit, but you've opened quite a lot of stores. As you mentioned, kind of digitally native, and now that's an important part. I believe you've got some wholesale partnerships going. You've been expanding your product line beyond boots. Can you just talk a little bit about how you thought about, or how you're thinking about adding those pieces and really getting the balance right between different channels and staying with that core boot Western wear ethos?
Sure. Retail, as I said, incredibly important. We are going to continue to open stores. At this point, at the end of this year, we'll have about 56 stores. We're being very careful about retail. Wholesale, we've just opened. We do want to be an omni, meeting the customer where they are. We have the luxury of kind of being in a position with white space that we can do this strategically. We don't have a lot of legacy distribution. We need to go, kind of see how it's doing and wind it down. So we are able to kind of look at this geographically. Where are certain physical distribution points that we want to be, but not necessarily optimal for us to open a store. So on the marketplace strategy, and wholesale does a couple of things for us. Number one, it gives us a very authentic consumer. As I mentioned before, the Western market, very fragmented. You've got a lot of terrific bespoke sort of mom and pop stores that have served a Western consumer for multi-generations. By being in those stores gives us a great access to authentic lifestyle consumers that are wearing boots some 7 days a week, not once a month or once a week. So it helps us to grow the roots as we're trying to push also into certain non-traditional Western markets. We'll also test, and we have been testing and done some work with Nordstrom. That's going incredibly well. We're in 12 doors starting May of this year, and we'll be looking to kind of double that in 2026. The sell-through has been terrific, and so Nordstrom's been a great partner as well. So we think we've got a lot of room on on the marketplace side of things. On the product side, still a lot of momentum in what we call kind of our best of breed products, which are traditional Western cowboy silhouettes, roper, those kinds of products. And we're also seeing a lot of success, and we do want to be lifestyle head to toe. So we're getting a lot of traction on denim, and then men's shirting as well. We sell a lot of pearl snaps, denim pearl snaps, as well as just performance shirts that are a little bit more, for the heat and wicking and all those types of things. So yeah, we're excited about some growth strategies, both on the product side as well as the marketplace side.
So I'm not looking for a number here, but I somewhat wonder how high is up for your brand. When we were thinking, when we first talked about booking you, Michael and I were talking about when we first had Viore founder Joe Kudlaw on the podcast, which was, I think, about 3 years ago now. And at the time, they were probably roughly the same size as you are now. You're probably a little bit bigger, at least in terms of store count. But there was this whole question of being seen as a very Southern California, almost like surfer guy kind of brand. How far could you take that? And as you may now, they're now in London and Seoul. Sure. And so the answer is apparently pretty far. But I'm curious if people say to you, oh, come on, like how many cowboys are there out there? How many people are there that really are interested in Western wear? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, we think it's that the size of the market is kind of sneaky large. We are seeing a lot of success in opening up in these non-traditional markets that I mentioned. If you look at some underlying things, I believe that Western is becoming more and more mainstream and more Americana, if you will. I think some of this started with the great storytelling Taylor Sheridan did with Yellowstone many years ago. They had 13 million viewers, I think, per episode. You look at country music and that genre being the fastest growing segment of music. And, over 52% of the population listens to country music. And if you look at that sort of geographically, that stat holds up on the West Coast as much as the East Coast. And it's not just in, more traditional Western places like Texas, et cetera, that are listening to country music. You see Morgan Wallen selling out in Levi Stadium 2 nights in a row, Zach Bryan selling out in Ann Arbor Stadium, George Strait, 106,000 people in Texas A&M. So you've got a lot of this underlying momentum. And so, yes, I believe they're tailwinds. But we think that the market is pretty big. And so we've got aspirations that, aren't just for a niche business here. I think we have to do it in a very thoughtful way. I've said this before, but I kind of want to use a little bit of the way in which we're going about it, whether it's through product or our creative and where we're putting our creative, that some of the heritage folks would be proud of the way in which we're trying to bring Western forward to a more modern marketplace and welcoming people into the tent. And I think as long as we do it very thoughtfully and authentically, it's a fairly sizable tent that we can grow. So, yeah, we're excited about that. And we're also seeing, people who love the brand and kind of the values that it stands for, both on the product side and the craftsmanship quality that I've mentioned. But we also think values like, integrity, hard work, welcoming, genuine, things that kind of the West represents, that's very aspirational for a lot of people, and especially what's going on in this day and time. Those are, I think, values hard to argue with. So, yeah, we want to kind of bring people along on this journey, and we think it's fairly sizable.
We'll be right back after these messages. Promotional support for the show comes from Find Mine. In the time it takes to listen to this ad, your team could have leveled up their productivity by 90% and set up your brand for increased sales. Find Mine's AI tools let you run operations on thousands of products right now. Get self-service AI to support product tagging for better success with AI agents, dynamic programmatic ads for Meta, visually similar product recs, complete the look styling, trend and campaign curations. Find Mine's innovative enterprise platform currently generates breakthrough customer experiences for top brands like Lululemon and Ann Taylor. See what Find Mine can do for you and join the waitlist at findmine.com/remarkable retail. Promotional support for the Remarkable Retail podcast is provided by Crave Retail. What's retail's biggest blind spot? the fitting room. A shopper wants to buy, but can't get the help they need. That's why global brands partner with Crave Retail, the market leader in smart fitting rooms. Crave connects that moment to your business, giving shoppers a voice, associates real-time alerts, and teams the data to buy smarter. The result? Higher conversion, better decisions, a seamless experience. Learn how fast you can elevate your fitting rooms at craveretail.com. Well, I love your description of the tailwind at Yellowstone or Landman or whatever. Pick your spot as behind your brand, and you're talking about expanding into new areas. And you recently opened a flagship in Soho, which is arguably one of the best showcases in retail, certainly in North America. Tell us about what your goals are for that store. Is it a new customer acquisition? Is it taking that radical hospitality into New York and showing the New York folks how it's done? Talk about how you think about that store.
Yeah, I think very excited about that store, and I think it's multi-purpose. We have not been opening stores for a quote marketing reason. Having said that, I believe that retail does help on brand awareness and things like that. Every store in our fleet right now is profitable, so we expect and that Soho will be no different. We're pretty careful when we open doors, so we know before we did Soho that we've got a lot of consumers in that market just from our e-com data. So while we believe that opening a store, as I said, will help on the brand awareness and will bring more consumers to us, we just think it's a great marketplace to showcase, again, a lot of the stuff that we're doing in retail with this radical hospitality mindset. It's also interesting, we chose Soho because it's got a combination of just a terrific area, but there's also a lot of tourists, so we're seeing a lot of international tourists. While we're not currently international, we believe that's a huge opportunity for us, but this is a way to see kind of also who's coming into those doors. And I think the first day we had a Japanese couple that came in and bought 15 pairs of boots. So we are seeing quite a bit of that as well, which is fun to see. But, our view on New York was, and I've said this before also, that, we want to make sure that when we go into these markets, we're kind of going authentically to Tecovas. We're not trying to be something different in New York because their consumers want something different from us than what we offer in our South Congress store in Austin. We think it's important to stick with our DNA and as I said, be authentically Western. Having said that, the assortment and the timing of a New York opening, it does kind of coincide with our sequencing of broadening the assortment a little bit. And we've got some what we call Western adjacent product that, if people in the Northeast aren't quite ready for a cowboy boot yet, but they still love the brand, they love the craftsmanship. We've got a slip-on product called the Monterey, which does over $6 million a year for us. So we think there's products that will resonate with those communities, and then over time get them connected with the brand as well, just more emotionally connected with the brand and what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, I've heard something like if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. So we're looking forward to seeing what comes of the New York store. And I imagine a lot of our listeners will be at the NRF Big Show in a couple of months. So be sure to get down to Soho to check that out. I think you'll be very impressed. By the way, I may also own a pair of those Monterey slip-ons, by the way. It's great. Great product.
I went to a wedding on the West Coast earlier in the spring, and I think 5 people I saw had the Monterey on. So that was really as well. Yeah.
Nice. So, but just quickly for you, before I turn it over to Michael to take us home, as you expand your assortment, does that tend to make you want to think about doing bigger stores, or, materially bigger stores? I realize you may flex the space that happens to be available or push it around the edges a little bit. But one of the things I like very much is the size of your store. You just can really showcase the boots. As you mentioned, you've got the bar. And in fact, the first time I went into one of your stores was in the North Park Mall here. And it was because I heard some live music being played. And I was like, what is going on here? And I wandered in right next to the Viore store, by the way.
Sure.
But in any event, just what are your thoughts about your footprint as you get into some of these Western adjacent products, more apparel, those kinds of things?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that we sort of talk about often. I think, just for the context, our store average is probably about 3,500 square feet, maybe a little less. The Soho store, for example, a flagship for us, has about 4,500, 4,700 selling space. That doesn't include a stock room. We're pretty careful about wanting to make sure we're not expanding footprints. I think my view is that we want to keep a pretty close eye on financial guardrails of I think I would say in the top quartile of retail economics as far as sales per square foot, four-wall EBITDA, payback periods, and those are incredibly important. And I think sometimes when you just start expanding spaces, it gets operationally more complex. You need more associates. You tend to have areas it's like a garage with too much space. Before you know it, there's boxes and junk filling it up. And I think it tends to kind of creep that way. So we're going to be pretty diligent about making sure that, and everything, the entire assortment doesn't need to be showcased. I think we're working on allocation strategy that really makes sense. Like, what product does resonate here? What can we kind of showroom that's sort of an endless aisle concept that if people want it, we can quickly order it for you and get it to you promptly. But I don't think we need to keep expanding stores. And as I said, men's shirting and denim, we think we can visually merchandise categories like that in the footprints that we have, and kind of want to stay diligent about where we are. I think one thing that that I'm interested in. So, for example, we've got the flagship in Soho. We may test things like a boot-only concept in Flatiron, for example. So, and kind of have a little bit of a hub and spoke model where, somebody wants to experience the entire assortment. We've got a great store in Soho. If you want to come in and look at boots, this is a great environment where we can still keep up very productive retail economics.
All right, David, this has been fantastic. Last question for you, and before we let you go and you ride off into the sunset, see what I did there? You talked about being new to retail and therefore not really constrained by traditional notions of how things should be done. And now you're making the transition to a much larger brand and something, from something more entrepreneurial. Any leadership words of advice for our listeners and wisdom you'd like to impart about where you are on the journey and how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I get a couple of things. One is, I think focus and priorities. I think as you start to get larger and, worry about, jumping an S curve, and I think a lot of times people move away from the core too quickly. I think there's only so many things that companies can do very well. And so I need to be careful of brainstorming too much, because a lot of times I feel like things that I say are taken as directives and not as kind of a brainstorming session. So focus is the key. And what are we saying no to is an important one. I think we are working on building a culture of leaders. I want people that are giving credit where credit's due, that are thoughtful about contingency plans, that kind of see the big picture, that want to develop people. We've read Radical Candor. We need to be clear with people about, and whatever term you want to use, clear as kind. Just trying to make sure people are in an environment where they can trust one another, they can hold each other accountable. And then we need to empower people and let them go do their jobs. And they're going to fail at certain things, but we'll learn a lot from it. We're not going to put them in a position where they're walking backwards off a cliff. But at the same time, they empowering our teams. I mean, that's why we hire these great people. And so let them get after it, but in a very focused way where everyone is very clear about their priorities and the alignment.
Well, this has been just a fantastic masterclass. It's been wonderful listening to you and your journey, and also the journey that the brand is on. So thank you very much for joining Steve and I on the Remarkable Retail podcast. I mean, it's really the epitome of what Steve often describes as perhaps special, not big, but I think you've got, as you said, you got a lot of growth ahead of you. So congratulations on your success so far, and we wish you much continued success.
Yeah, thank you both so much. It's thanks for having me, and I think we're on an exciting journey here. So, well, love to keep you posted on our progress.
All right, we are back. Let's talk about remarkable stories this week. What have you got on your mind?
Well, I've got, I guess, one, but two parts to it. Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon, said two, I think, pretty remarkable things. Now, this is just, we didn't have time to get to it. And, well, one of these things we could have gotten to, but we didn't have time. The other happened just after in an interview. Mm-hmm. So two pretty remarkable things. One, I would say I'm way more skeptical of than the other. The one that I think is quite interesting, and I guess I just don't have a good ability to know how accurate it will be, but he said that Amazon can double retail sales by about 2030 without adding any people. And I think we've touched on this a little bit previously. One of the things that happened at Amazon was they were growing their headcount very quickly, and as did a lot of companies in the COVID era, where they just basically, I mean, some of it they needed to do to keep up with the demand, but some of it was like, oh, this e-commerce growth is going to continue, the so-called great acceleration, which is actually a topic for another day, become much more of the deceleration or moderation. But to be able to think about a retailer as big as Amazon being able to, because doubling is, you know, a lot of incremental revenue without adding any people. And it's not all AI, though that is a contributor. A lot of this is automation, which is basically robots. Yeah. So there's whole, you know, I actually think one of my predictions for next year, I think, is that automation, robotics, and similar technologies are going to start to get talked about, maybe not as much as AI, but I think is really going to be an interesting story. The second thing, which I also think I'd like to come back to talk about in a little bit more detail, and this is definitely the one I'm much more dubious about, is that Andy said that that the e-commerce or the retail physical store to e-commerce balance, so generally speaking, depends a little bit on your definition, which country, but sales through physical stores being about 80%, e-commerce being about 20%, that is going to flip. Now, this is a very similar prediction that longtime listeners will hear me make fun of Mark Andreessen, who predicted in the future all shopping would be done online. And since he made that prediction, we haven't really gotten any closer to that being true. But both Andy and Mark, I'm on a first name basis, and then we hang out.
I was going to say
we hang out all the time at the. I'm not going to say. Anyway, we hang out all the time and chat about such things. Andy did the same thing that Mark did, which is brilliant, which is did not give a time frame. So I don't personally think predictions are super helpful if you don't give at least some sense of the time frame. And I'm not sure for purposes of anything useful coming out of this prediction, if it's more than 15 years away, the utility of that prediction. But anyway, you have to believe a lot of things are going to change for that possibly to be true anytime in the next 25 or 30 years. But at some point, I'd like to come back to this because there are some interesting things about why e-commerce is decelerating. Does agentic AI and some other things have the potential to suddenly reaccelerate that? What does that mean for number of stores? So I can't give service to that, but I think it's a really interesting prediction. Obviously, it's a bit self-serving for Amazon, but at the same time, they do know a thing or two about e-commerce. So time will tell.
Yeah, it's worth paying attention to for sure. My experience was actually a retail experience that I found fairly remarkable in its conclusion. So, in this, we're doing more and more video as part of this whole media empire we're building, you and me, and so it's time to get a new video camera.
Is this a media empire we're building? Maybe you're building. I don't know.
One brick at a time.
Yeah.
I was struggling to find a solution that would under $3,000 to $4,000 which I wasn't going to pay, that would allow me to record video for like an hour or longer because the battery power would run out or the cameras would overheat. So you need to get up into that stratosphere. But I visited a camera store, and the more I talked about it, the more I came to a startling conclusion. The absolute best camera that solved all my needs was an iPhone 17 Pro. And I bought one, And it's remarkable in as much as you can run that thing for like 8 hours doing video. It's meant to cool it off, and then it uploads to the cloud. Anyway, I found it just remarkable when you think about the journey of that product from where it was to where it is. And now it's one of the best video cameras. Like they say it, you could shoot a whole movie with it, but really to me, maybe the penny dropped, so to speak, this week. So I just found that, quite remarkable.
To me, it's just another example of the more exponential change we see in so many areas, rather than linear, and just things that seemed unimaginable 3, 4, 5 years ago are here. And then you cast your mind forward and you say, well, what is the world going to look like? Which is maybe, just going back to the thing I said, maybe there's such an intersection of new technology that will allow customers to feel like I don't have to go to the store to try it on or visualize or, the
personalization gets so good that, Amazon's been talking about, that, collaborative filtering for 25 years. We know what you want before you know it kind of stuff. So, anyway.
Never say never.
Never say never. All right, let's talk about a little more closer. What's on your radar screen for the weeks ahead?
Just real quickly, I feel like we are definitely pivoting quite rapidly to the holidays. Mm-hmm. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, had several discussions this past week about how promotions are moving up, people starting to read the tea leaves. I understand in Canada, it is not really the holiday season until Remembrance Day passes or the first snowfall or something like that. That's very Canadian.
November 12th is really when it that's a bit more in the imagination. People start shopping before, but retailers are very reluctant to do a whole lot in their stores because they do get criticism that it kind of buries the November 11th day, which we all need to honor. So there's a little bit of that for sure. Yeah,
no, I get that. But the little specific thing I'll mention, or a couple specific things. So I think we've got the last big forecast of the season. The NRF, the National Retail Federation, they're forecasting 3.7 to 4.2, which, as we've looked at some of the other forecasts we've talked about, I do think most people are converging around a 4-ish number, which would be lower than last year. I think actually lower than the last several years, but still, not a weak number. But we're also a couple of other things that are just interesting. One is that the kind of a side indicator, it's maybe like the lipstick index for the fulfillment industry, which is it has been one of the worst years in the last few years for shipments of cardboard boxes. And of course, you need cardboard boxes in particular to ship packages through the mail. Also, obviously some other packages that end up going to store fulfillment are there. But, this is thought to be correlated with what people are expecting their e-commerce business to be. So they are down year over year. Now, nobody is predicting that I've seen that's credible a decline in e-commerce, but they are predicting a relatively low number. And then the other thing, which the NRF actually mentioned in their holiday forecast news announcement, is that this is the lowest year of seasonal hiring in several years as well.
Right.
So that also seems to suggest that the expectation is we will definitely be on the lower side than we have experienced the last few years. So, my crystal ball is in the shop. So I don't have much more to say about that.
Well, my one quick comment being in a country that has had inflation is that 3.7 to 4.2% number may indeed come true just by price inflation, not unit growth.
Correct.
So, you could surprise on the upside, but not for the reasons that anybody wants, but because the prices went up.
Yeah. I think ultimately, we've had this discussion throughout when there, particularly, a few years ago when there was a lot of inflation, is parsing out what's unit growth, what's customer count growth, what's traffic growth. Those kinds of things I think over time speak more to the underlying health of the business, but at the same time, they're real dollars that help pay people. So I am hopeful that, there are some retailers like Walmart that do a great job of pulling out, this was traffic growth, this was the average unit retail, this was,
gross in that.
Give you a little better sense of what's really going on under the hood, so to speak.
Well, picking up on one of your themes a little bit, I'm planning my annual trip to Manhattan to do the prospecting tour for amazing, remarkable stores. I do a store tour for Canadian executives during NRF, and I'm getting ready to go down and getting the tour together. I'm going down with the new president of Retail Council of Canada, Kim, who you met actually this week already. I'm pretty sure, Printemps and Tecovas stores will be on the tour. Shout out again to Nick and his team. But for the rest of them, stay tuned. Well, listen, have a wonderful time. Say hi if you're going to see him to Ben Miller and the team at Shop Talk. You're in the same geography, and listen, have a great time. You're going to a Premier League game. Go Man U.
Yep. Yes,
would be my
now. But by the time people hear it, it will have been settled because.
Well, all right. Well, good.
No wagering. Yeah.
Good vibing. Anyway, the top of the table is pretty close, so it should be a great game if you're a fan, or even if you're a fan of sports, or even the Premier League. So travel safe, have a ton of fun, enjoy a bit of curry on the Brick Lane or wherever you're going to be, and we'll talk to you, and everyone will talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. To help more retail leaders discover the industry's leading podcast, please drop us that 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your pods. And for more on my strategic advisory services, keynote speaking, best-selling books, and even more retail industry insights, go to stephenpdennis.com.
If you are a brand or service provider looking to take your influence to the next level, reach out to us for sponsorship, advertising, or event partnerships. And if you want to learn more about my own keynote speaking and advisory practice, reach out to me via LinkedIn.